Hi, and welcome to the SalesRX podcast. We provide actionable insights for revenue professionals looking to find the right prescription in their sales process. So let's jump right in. Hello, and welcome to all my Sales RXers and first-time listeners to the Sales RX podcast. I'm your host and your sales doctor, Chet Lovegren, and I'm here with a brand new episode for you today, where we're going to be talking about breaking into tech and the value of diversity in the workplace. For that conversation, I have a really special guest with me today, Kendrick Trotter, who is the founder of ISSA Technology, which is a virtual community with the goal of diversifying the tech industry by connecting underrepresented talent with opportunities in the tech industry where, frankly, minority individuals are historically excluded. Think of sales, marketing, engineering, and programming. And he's going to have a little chat with us today about his insights as the founder of ISSA Technology. Kendrick, happy Wednesday. Welcome to the show.
Appreciate it, Chet. Thank you for having me. Let's get into it.
I love it. Now, I gave a little reference for your background as it stands today, but I know before we really dive into some of the questions, our listeners would love to just kind of hear a little bit more about Kendrick. Who is Kendrick? How did he get here? How did he find this passion for what he's doing? How did he become the founder of this great community and platform? Tell us a little bit about Kendrick.
Yeah. I appreciate you asking that. So when I think about Kendrick and what's important to understand about Kendrick is a little less about like where I am today and more about how it is that I got there. So for me personally, I was raised in the Bay Area by a single mom. And although we were just, 10 or 15 minutes away from the Silicon Valley, I had no idea about the opportunities in tech, was mostly focused on, being a student athlete. And I really saw that as my way to a better lifestyle. And after playing football at the University of Idaho, coming home, not really knowing what it was I wanted to do, I started Ubering. And while Ubering, I actually met a VP of sales at AWS. His name is Josh Berzin, who, as my Uber rider, he told me about the opportunities in tech. And he said, Kendrick, great companies are looking for strong, diverse talent like yourself. And that was my first time hearing about opportunities in tech, and specifically in tech sales. He told me that people in entry-level positions can make six figures, in entry-level positions. So that was really what excited me. When I got my first job in tech, I started as an SDR for about a year. I was working at an email security company called Agari. And after a year of being an SDR, my first few months really struggling a bit just to learn, some of the terminology, learning how to make people feel comfortable over cold call, was promoted into an account executive at Agari. In my first year as an account executive, I became a President's Club recipient, which I was really proud of. From there, I actually left Agari to become a major accounts rep at a public cybersecurity company called Radware. So, I think that I definitely sought out the less traveled road, which kind of led me to a very opportunistic chance with Radware, and being in a position at the age of 23, 24 years old, managing accounts like, eBay, Salesforce, Workday, Twitter, was a huge honor of mine. So, and kind of doing all that work and being a good employee, I always volunteered my time to trying to help more underrepresented people break into the tech space. And, before I knew it, my side hustle had actually become my career. So I met some good people through the community of Pavilion, which was formerly Revenue Collective, like Dalton Van Hatcher, which was, my original co-founder of ISSA Technology, who really just inspired me to dream without limits. And he said, Kendrick, if this is what you have a passion for, you should do this full time. So we just celebrated our first full year with ISSA Technology. I had the opportunity to place, over 100 individuals. And now our goal moving forward for the next year is that we want to be in a position to place 100 people in a day. So in 30 seconds, I guess a little long-winded, but that's about a little bit about me and the position that I'm in today.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really awesome too, that I have this big thing where I hate people that just read a book and then go do it once and then try to tell everybody, I can show you how to do it. You actually did it and you climbed up the ladder and you were very successful and you were doing it on the side while you were still doing your regular job before you took hold of that reality of doing it full time. You broke into tech, you moved up the ranks from the SDR role. You were 23, 24 years old handling major accounts. Like that's a really big deal, So if anyone is here to the expert to show them, that's you. And you really demonstrate that. And I love that. Before we dive into the business questions, I'm kind of curious, what position did you play when you played football?
Yeah, I was actually a defensive back. So I mostly played corner. I was fortunate to be a captain of the team. My first year at Idaho, we won 4 games. The second year, we only lost 4 games. So we won a championship game. It was something that we were really proud of. So I was a defensive back.
That's awesome. I have so much respect for people that can cover receivers because I played linebacker and I was probably the worst linebacker on our high school football team. And anytime they asked me to cover a tight end over the middle, I was like, no, I don't want to play zone. I just want to rush. Like, let me play on the outside, Like,
let me tackle.
Yeah, exactly.
I get you on that.
Now, Kendrick, as someone who runs a successful platform that's really focused on helping people get placed in open roles, what are you seeing right now in terms of hiring trends and insights that you can share with us? What's important to your partners that you're working with as you place people in open roles, and what's important to the people that you're placing in those roles, and what are you seeing in terms of hiring trends?
Yeah. So again, great questions. I think there's 2 things that I've seen really kind of stand out to me in the last 6 to 8 months, kind of being on the front lines of running a staffing company specifically for underrepresented people. So as I give feedback on some of the experiences that I'm seeing on my end, I think it is important for everybody to understand, the group that I represent and where most of this feedback is coming from. So there's 2 things that I've really seen kind of stand out to me. And the first thing is the response of underrepresented people to assessment tests. And the second thing is this transition or this battle, so to speak, that includes the people versus remote work, right? And those are the 2 things that I see really sticking out. So I'll talk a little bit about the assessment test. For me, what I'm seeing in my community is that the responses from underrepresented people to assessment tests is that they generally feel that a lot of assessment tests tend to be biased. And I know that a lot of times when you're taking an assessment test, you're told that, there is no right or wrong answer, just be honest, right? But whenever you're taking anything that's assessing something, it's assessing your answers based on what is considered right versus what is considered wrong, or what's considering you to be a good fit for the role that it is you may be hiring for. And I think for all of us, like if we really want to respond to a question honestly, we can only respond to that question honestly based on our experiences. And so I think it would be safe to assume, Chet, that like your experiences of how you were raised and the area you were raised in was probably different from me naturally, right? Just because you grew up in a different area. So maybe you enjoy different things. Maybe you have different habits. Maybe you grew up in a home where you had a lot of brothers and sisters. Maybe you grew up in a home where you had no brothers and sisters. And maybe I grew up in an opposite situation. So what I've learned in the last few months is that a lot of underrepresented people are actually being disqualified by assessment tests unintentionally for being honest and transparent about some of their responses. And as a leader, it's kind of challenging because it's like, do you tell someone to be honest on an assessment test, or do you coach them for the answer that people are looking for? So, one of the typical interview questions that is usually answered in like a sales position is, are you would you rather be the most liked person on your team and the lowest performer, or would you rather be the most successful person on your team and hated by everyone on your team? So I know what sales leaders are looking for in their response to that, which is like, hey, I want somebody who wins at any cost. But in some meetings that I've had with my community And what they helped me to understand is, based on some of their experiences, there's consequences to being hated around by everybody around you.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're from a pretty tough neighborhood like I'm from, those consequences could be very severe,
Yeah.
not being liked or, being willing to do whatever it takes to get on top.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I spent more time in my community and I started to understand, responses and kind of the psychology, so to speak, going behind like some of these responses, I started to understand that in a lot of situations, these things aren't as black as white as one may assume. So that's something that I've kind of seen become more and more prevalent in our community in the last few months is assessment tests.
Yeah. And anybody who listens to the podcast knows that I'm actually really anti-assessment test, because as someone who's been hiring for 3 years, I will tell you that one company I worked at, we used an assessment test company, and the 2 best candidates I probably found were 2 of the lowest scoring candidates. And one of the highest scoring people, I was like, I don't think you would fit in well here at all. It's kind of what you said. It's a little morbid to bring up, but we were talking before the podcast. We were going to actually record last week, but I was out with the stomach flu. And when I had the stomach flu,
we were out.
Yeah, you were out too. That's right. Yeah, we both got hit hard with the stomach flu. And when I was sick, I was watching that show on Netflix, Making a Murder, about the guy in what is it, Stephen Avery, the guy in Wisconsin or whatever, that may or may not have been wrongfully accused of murder after he was suing the county for already putting him in jail for 18 years. And when they were at a 7th state appeal or something like that, and talking about the evidence, the trial attorney, Kathleen Zellner, his new lawyer, was talking about why the case didn't go well. And she goes, well, you're in front of people in a city in Chicago, and that guy doesn't understand a frame of reference for why there are shell casings all over the yard, because he doesn't realize that in rural Wisconsin, people are always walking around with a .22 rifle, shooting at gophers, shooting at targets. That's normal at a place like where Stephen Avery grew up. It's not normal for someone in the suburbs of Chicago to have shell casings all over the place. And so, like, a similar thing that you bring up, like in your community, it was a little bit different. You wouldn't want to win at all costs because you needed to be liked, because the consequences could be fatal. Whereas people that are, hiring sales teams, for them, it's like they've been climbing up the ladder so long, they're only thinking in the corporate sense, because it's that precognitive bias that people forget when they're asking people questions. And that's one of the reasons I don't like assessments, is I think I feel like they're always set there to trick people, set people up to fail.
And
really.
It's also a way to continue to attract the same type of people, which will ultimately go into our conversation later about like the value of diversity and what diversity really means. And I understand that how much assessment tests can assist, right, with hiring demand, especially if you have a ton of candidates. So, I'm not completely against them. But to that point, I think that in a lot of situations, things aren't necessarily as black and white as one may assume. And I think the intention of that question is to measure an individual's like level of competitiveness, which, like, as a manager, you always want to hire the most competitive people as possible. But I also think that, just because someone isn't, quote unquote, maybe because they're afraid of the consequences, doesn't necessarily mean they're not a competitor. So, now, years ago, my answer would have been very easily like, I just want to win. And now hearing these different opinions and kind of remembering, the background that I came from, I think my answer has changed a little bit. So, but at the same time, I also think I'm one of the highest competitors in the world, right? Like I played sports at one of the highest levels possible. I've been successful as an individual, right? But I think that was an interesting topic to kind of talk about.
Yeah, I totally agree. And for me, it's like, if you want to assess somebody after you're thinking, well, like, even when you bring them on board, run a DISC assessment, run something that shows you the way they learn or the way their strengths are. Don't run something to filter out whether or not the person should work for you, because those tests are typically wrong. Like, you can't answer that on paper. I always think of when somebody posted, they were talking about resumes, and they posted the resume of the guy who ran WeWork into the ground, Adam Newman, but they were like, this is what resumes look like on LinkedIn. It was like this glowing resume, but you look at the reality of what happened, it was like, yikes, you know what I mean? Like, thank God WeWork is still a strong company, but on paper it looks great. In reality of what happened, not so good.
I was on a podcast a couple of weeks ago, And I guess there's research on like some of the top CEOs in the world and how most of the top CEOs in the world wouldn't have the requirements on a resume for most of the jobs that they're hiring for.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting, right? Like, so my opinion on intelligence and the best measurements of intelligence, in my opinion, I think is the ability to problem solve and creativity,
Yeah.
right? Because a lot of people who have very strong resumes are not necessarily great problem solvers, or they might not have the most creativity. But the people that I've been around that have, in my opinion, been the most intelligent are the people that can do those two things the strongest.
Yeah, I agree. I want to jump in, continuing on like the conversation around trends and insights, and kind of hear what you think are some of the factors that are leading to this massive shift in employment, where now, as someone also myself who's hiring, and you as someone who helps, bridge that gap, what is causing this massive shift of first time applicants in tech now more than ever? What has changed at the business level? What has changed in the candidate level that has created this other than COVID, right? Because I mean, that's the elephant in the room. We all know that. But what specifically in your eyes has led to that massive shift?
Yeah. So I think that there's a couple things, right? There's usually incidents that drive demand, right? And I think the two biggest things that have driven the demand for like the priority of hiring like more diverse candidates specifically, unfortunately, is the slaying of George Floyd. And the second thing was, the increase of remote jobs in the last year has been like, over 340%, and a report by LinkedIn. And so I think that one of the biggest things is like education. There's a lot of people just like myself who have no idea still about the different opportunities in tech. Or when they hear tech, they assume it's only engineering. They assume it's coding. They assume that the barrier to entry is too difficult, and they don't know where to begin. So I think now, as we have these different media outlets like Instagram and Twitter and TikTok that are bringing information to the community that maybe traditionally weren't aware of these opportunities, there's a shift in interest because now people who are coming from these different areas are seeing people that resemble similar to themselves in these positions, making a lot of money. And now it's like sparking interest about opportunity that a lot of people didn't know existed before, right?
Yeah.
So like my personal goal is like when I grew up in the area I grew up in, if you wanted to be successful, you had, three options. Or if you wanted to make money, you had three options. And it was being entertainment, being sports, or unfortunately being in the streets, right? And that was just the environment that I was in. That was what I seen. And I didn't see other college graduates. I didn't meet people who were doing things differently. So, although it was always an option, when you don't necessarily know about a different option, it's kind of hard to pursue a different option. And now for me, myself personally, like I want to create a brand and I want to create something with us in technology where people that come from all walks in life, specifically people that come from low income areas, they know when they grow up, like, hey, if I don't make it in sports, if I don't make it in entertainment, I'm going to be a tech CEO. I'm going to be a VP of sales. I'm going to be a CMO. I'm going to be a CRO. So I think, that's a big piece. And then obviously like businesses have an incentivization right now and somewhat requirements in certain states to have a certain percentage of their business and leadership team be diverse, right? Like there's actually a law that was passed in California that says a certain percentage of your board has to be diverse, right? Like these things are coming from the top down in response to the George Floyd event and just the heightened awareness now of like diversity, equity, and inclusion. On the other side, though, that I think is really important is a lot of times when people hear diversity, they assume Black and brown. But like that's actually not true. Like diversity is actually defined as variety, right? And the value of having a team comprised of variety, research proves that diverse teams produce 30% more than teams that lack diversity. And I think there's a lot of research that is showing the value of having a diverse team versus not. So like I love Tom Brady, right? I think Tom Brady is an awesome quarterback. I would never have Tom Brady play running back, right? I would never have Tom Brady play defense, right? Marshawn Lynch is awesome, but like I would never have him be a kicker, right?
Mhm.
And so the point is like when you're building a championship team, you need different people from different backgrounds to play different positions to add different ideas. And if you attract a group where everyone has the same experiences, which I feel like, like assessment tests generally can do that, where you're continuously attracting a certain type of person, then your ideas and the growth of your business is going to be limited. So
Yep.
That's what I'm seeing.
And that's 100% correct. And one of the reasons I think Pavilion has done so well, especially if you look at like the trajectory they've been on in just the last year, one of their core values is diversity of perspectives make us better. And that's why I always, when people say, oh, we want to hire for culture fit, I'm like, well, what does that really mean? Because if you just hire everybody of the same thing, like even sometimes I don't mind hiring a salesperson that isn't the most uber competitive, drive driven person, because guess what? I wasn't really that at one point in my life. I just want to make a lot of money. I wasn't like, I'm going to be the top Wolf of Wall Street. I was like, dude, if I hit 80% of quota, I'm good. You know what I mean? I still make more money than I've ever made before. Like I just wanted to better myself, but I wasn't like this. I still wanted my work-life balance. I wanted all these things. Right. And so I don't hire against those kind of things. For me, culture is typically just like, hey, are you a good-natured person? Do you align with the values that we have? One of them being diversity of perspectives. Right. But when you think about the other values, members first, like, are you always focused on our members? Are you, if you don't know, Sam Jacobs always says, if you don't know what else to do, go help a member. Like at the end of the day, if you're like, hey, I don't know what call to make next or who to prospect next, then go in the community and try to find a member to help. Like at the end of the day, that's our first and most important value. Like, do you align with those kind of things? Are you that kind of person? Or are you like, hey, I don't really know what to do today. I'm going to go hop on TikTok for 15 minutes and watch a bunch of Chet's dumb content. Right. But I love how, you kind of brought that full swing and you have that perspective from being on the front lines with the people that you're working with. And I think you hit on something important. The information is moving faster, right? So people probably weren't aware that like somebody working at a car dealership probably knows that someone sold the CRM to the car dealership, but they probably think there's like one guy that sells a bunch of CRMs to a bunch of car dealerships. They don't know that there are teams and multiple people on teams and multiple functions at multiple companies that are all vying for that attention of that car dealership to sell the CRM. And I think I totally agree with you that the information is just moving so much faster that people are now more aware of the fact that there's 38,000 tech jobs right now available on LinkedIn. I also think LinkedIn personally is going more social. I think it's not as business and professional as it used to be. It's way more of a social app. And so you see people.
And I think that's a response to COVID as well. Right? Because like naturally that we work from home, we're kind of on LinkedIn more than we ever were.
Yeah.
And, and I think that the social aspect and it becoming more of a social first, really tight professional platform is really in response to, us just having more time on our hands and, kind of using that experience to just communicate with others and express ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're totally on point there. I'm curious. Is all this? Are we like approaching a bubble as well? Like, is all this hiring, all this work from home, like especially with how things are, happening overseas, internationally, there's some conflict going on. And now COVID seems like it's dying down. Like I know in LA County, they just lifted a bunch of mask and vaccine mandates that, now we went to the store the other day, Whole Foods, there were only 3 people with masks, not including my kids and I, cause I'm still like, hey, let's just play it safe. But like we're lowering those restrictions. There's international conflict going on. I see more and more people talking about how work from home is drifting and companies are asking people to come back to work. Do you think we're in a bubble, or do you think the work from home and aggressive tech sales hiring landscape is going to continue and this is just a new normal? What is your outlook on that?
I could talk about this forever. And I was talking about this with my team a few minutes ago. The meeting went 30 minutes over.
There we go.
So this is what my summary is, right? It's the people versus remote work, right? Our corporations versus remote work, okay? So again, I'm on the front line, so I'll tell you what I'm seeing. What I'm seeing from corporations is that they are looking for people to go back into the office by the summer, right? There's a big incentive to go back in office. Obviously, like a lot of them are prioritizing hybrid. And in my opinion, like things will start hybrid and they'll want people to be full time. And I think the reason for that is, generally like one of the top three biggest investments that a corporation makes a year is generally like in their real estate of their actual office and buildings, right? And it's hard to justify that when you don't have anyone actually in the office. So there is a push to get people back in the office. Personally, I'm a fan of people working in office, specifically in entry level roles, because I think it's really easy to fire someone you don't have a personal relationship with. And for me in my journey, I would have been fired if I started my career in a remote job. But what really helped me is like I just was bumping shoulders with people I had no reason I should have been talking to. Right. Like I remember being an SDR and like our director of like marketing and our director of engineering, like they brought me in to like help with our data sheet and our white paper. And they're like asking me opinions. And then like my CEO, who would always come in a suit, I would always be like trying to outdress him. And we had this like weird competition. And like I have this weird relationship with now the CEO of the company. So those are all things that like really helped me. Now, what I'm seeing from the people are 100% prioritizing convenience and remote work. 100%, like maybe 95, right? Because I have to be open. And I think that's the disconnect is that, when we were coming up, it was, normal. And it was actually really cool to be like a hustler, right? To work super long hours or to commute to work, right? Like that was something that was actually very respectable. And what I've noticed so far is like there's a much bigger push in this generation of like convenience and like, what you expose someone to the fact that they can, work from home and now you're trying to take it away from them. I think that's going to be a battle. And so, realistically, what I've seen with some of our companies, we had some companies that paid 50% less than some other companies, but they were fully remote. And they attracted way stronger talent than that company that paid a lot more money. So it's going to be interesting because obviously both sides, the people and the companies have leverage. But I think with the competitiveness of the market, the people actually have more leverage than the organizations because the organizations are only as good as their people. So, in regards to like where the future's headed, it's also, even more interesting because in COVID, all these startup businesses were created, like Pavilion. Well, Pavilion accelerated, right? Us and technology was created. And we were remote from the beginning, right? So it's kind of like this old school versus new school. And I think it really just is going to come down to like, attracting the best talent. And the companies that can do that will win. And I think a big piece of that is like, I think people are really prioritizing right now convenience.
Yeah. I think it's different on where you live too, in my opinion. Like I'm not in the position you're in, but if I live in Omaha, Nebraska, I don't mind going into office because it takes me 15, 20 minutes, no matter where I live, right? If I'm in LA, I live in Inglewood. If I worked in Santa Monica, I don't want to drive 2 hours round trip every single day. I'm not doing that. Right. Part of the reason I quit a job in 2019 was because I was working in Burbank, but I lived in Inglewood. That was 2.5, 3 hours every single day. That's not going to work for me. I think we've all been spoiled with the work from home thing too, that I think at some point, like if people are willing to quit their jobs and take no pay to go pursue whatever they want in life, the great resignation, good luck when you start trying to make people come back in the office and they're like, there are a million other jobs that might pay me $5,000 less a year or something, but I can still work from home. It's just not going to happen.
And that's what I'm seeing. Like people are definitely prioritizing work from home and not saying I agree or disagree. Right. But, I have clients that I talk to all the time and they're like, hey, like, what do you think is a competitive advantage? And I'm like, I'm gonna be honest with you, the people, the talent, they're prioritizing work from home.
Yeah. Like I said, I couldn't imagine in like large metropolitan areas, like if you're based in New York, Seattle, LA, like you might just have to abide by it. Plus cost of living. I mean, I could hire someone in, Kansas City, Missouri, a lot less than someone in LA for an SDR job. They expect more in LA because the cost of living's higher. I would embrace it. But yeah, I could see where like if I own a company in Cleveland or something like that, it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, I do miss a lot myself about the office. There are things that I think if people go back to the office, there just needs to be a change in the perception of work. And it's like, if you really don't want to sit at your desk for 9 hours a day, you don't have to. Like if you come in and you bang out 50 calls and you set 4 appointments and you eat lunch and you go to a team training, this, that, and it's like 3:30 and you want to dip, go do it. You know what I mean? Like we got to be a little bit more, we got to simulate that remote work vibe just a little bit better, while getting the in-office collaboration that everybody's craving.
It's going to be interesting. And I feel like I'm more so watching as a fan because, my business right now, like we'll be remote, we don't have any plans necessarily to have an office. I would love the office. I've always wanted that, but it doesn't really make sense for us, but kind of watching everybody else kind of try to figure it out. It's really interesting to kind of witness.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit with the time we have left about going further in on what you're talking about the value of diversity in the workplace. I don't have a source to cite, but I have a really close friend, Kevin Hooks. He was most recently the chief community officer of Acorns. And he was talking to me about diversity probably like 6 months ago. And he was telling me that, there's a report out there about how diverse companies tend to bring in 3 billion more in annual revenue than companies that don't have a focus on diversity. Again, can't cite the source because I can't exactly remember the report. He emailed it to me somewhere. It's in my inbox. It's like a 320-page workplace statistic report that he sent to me. But what are you seeing in terms of the value that people are getting by putting a focus on their DEI initiatives, and what can you speak to in terms of not only just from a perspective mindset, but the diversity and what the value of diversity in the workplace is bringing to your clients?
So we have about 28 paying customers, so a little less than 30. And I can say that at least 20 of our customers in the last year have received some type of funding or exit, right? And so when I was actually working with Chorus, Chorus was a big customer of ours. Before they got acquired, I actually did a press release with the CEO of Chorus. Now they're obviously acquired by ZoomInfo, but I did a press release with Jim, and Jim said that his only regret as a founder in building like other businesses was that he didn't prioritize DEI earlier. So he was like, the thing that I learned is when I started another company, I was going to prioritize DEI from the beginning, every single chance that I got, right? Variety. And so, again, I think when we kind of can transition our mind away from DEI being limited to just Black and brown and DEI being more like open to variety, it's very easy to see the value of variety. So for us, like at us in tech, we consider like we're a community of underrepresented people. So we define that as underrepresented ethnicities, first generation college graduates, single parent households, members of the LGBTQA community, military veterans, right? A very broad definition of what we consider. My original co-founder, Dalton Van Hatter, is a white male, right? Because in my opinion, in talking about DEI, like there's no louder voice than the voice of a white and a Black person working together. And I think I know that's been a huge reason why we've had so much success and traction so far. So I think, when I'm selling us in tech, that's the biggest thing that I try to do with everybody in the room to make everybody feel more comfortable about the experience or being more open to that idea of like, attracting and retaining more diverse candidates is, hey, diversity doesn't just mean Black and brown. Most of us probably identify or have someone we're close to that would identify or associate with one of these groups as underrepresented.
And I think it was a LinkedIn diversity report, and I think it was 2020, so it might be a little outdated, but I know that I read that female sales leaders outperformed their male counterparts by 3%. And we were on sales tip talk on, or sales tips talk on TikTok. Leslie, she was posting this thing about male sales leaders that think that they're the hot stuff. And I was like, if you're going to use that, I think you need this ammo, because this is a real stat that's out there.
Wow.
And she's like, oh wow, this is amazing. And I'm like, yeah, exactly.
You have to share that with me, because our ladies are crushing it.
Mm-hmm.
Some of our ladies at Us in Tech work for Pavilion. We have like Elora, and we have Jolene, and we have Puma, Taliesin, and they're crushing it. And in our community in general, we have a ladies group, and it's called Ladies in Tech. They call it the Lit Group, and they're crushing.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily have data to justify like what group is performing the best, but I would love that article just for the ladies to see, that data. They'll love that.
Yeah, I'll send it over to you. And for reference, we had Jolene on the podcast a few weeks ago, because this is her first time in a tech role, and she's crushing it. She's our top SDR. She's on the AE promotion path. You know what I mean? She's the best SDR at our company, and a future AE possibly, so testament to Us in Tech, right? And testament also to the power of diversity. I
think the really cool thing too about Jolene, like two things, is like one, like originally, like she had, again, like a person who just didn't really know about the opportunities in tech.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, it's really easy to help somebody who just needs guidance. Like Jolene was a rock star from the beginning.
Yeah.
She got placed in like 3 or 4 weeks, right? But like, she just needed guidance. But I think the cooler thing about Jolene is like, she's performed, and like, she's also assisted a lot of other people in getting into the space as well. Yeah. And when I tell the candidates is like, hey, like, the better that we do as underrepresented candidates, the more people like us will be, invited to the game.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. In closing here, I want to kind of turn it over to the candidate side and hear from you as someone who's working on the front lines in this space, doing what you do every single day. What advice would you give to someone that wants to break in tech, but might be struggling to either get exposure or land a second round of interviews, aside from just going on YouTube and figuring out how to interview better? Like what should they do? What advice would you give them? What would Kendrick say if I came to you and I said, hey man, I'm trying to break into this. I'm, 28 years old. I want to be an SDR, break into tech. What do I do, man? I'm struggling.
Yeah, I would say, just begin and don't quit. Right? Like right now, there's a lot of resources and there's a lot of groups out there and programs that can help you with this journey. Don't go through this journey alone, right? Like, so specifically for us in tech, we're focused on bridging a gap between hiring tech companies and underrepresented people. We source or assist in sourcing for all positions. So if you're an engineer, if you're a fifth year, if you're a senior position, we just placed a director of information security. And then specifically for our entry level, like soft skill positions, if you have aspirations of getting into like customer success, sales, or recruiting, we have an interview coaching curriculum that you get to go through to learn like the basics of interviewing, right? How to perform in a SaaS interview. And then in addition to that, we have a boot camp that you have the opportunity to complete that really helps you minimize that onboarding period. And then we have mentors that we can pair you with, right? Like mentors can save you a lot of time. Mm-hmm. And then in additionally, like another app that I think is doing a really good job specifically for people looking for like more technical roles is Career Karma, right? So Career Karma is doing a really good job of helping people who are, looking to get into a technical role, but needing maybe like some boot camp or certification experience. For us in tech specifically, we're a free program. So our mentees, you don't pay anything to be a part of our program. For a lot of other programs, you can pay anywhere from like $5,000 to $30,000 to have access to these resources. And, my thing that I would say is whether you join a free program or you join a program where it's not necessarily free, really just kind of value and put your focus on like the return of investment. Anything that helps you go faster will eventually be worth it. So that's my 2 cents on that.
And don't sign an ISA.
Yeah.
Whatever you do, don't sign an ISA, please.
Yeah.
For the love of God, don't do it. It looks attractive on the surface, but you can do it without one. Trust me. We hire a lot of people from programs that don't require ISAs.
The other thing is like, people, underrepresented people don't really know what an ISA is.
Yeah.
Right. And when you don't really have much, you don't really have much leverage. You're very vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why for me and us in technology, like you don't sign any contract at all. Mm-hmm. Right. Like you acknowledge our terms of service, but at the end of the day, like we recognize how vulnerable this group is. And in my opinion, like coming from that group, coming from those experiences, if you want to help people that don't really have access to resources, telling them that there's a minimum requirement for certain things, I think it's a bit contradicting. The other thing that I'll say that you should look out for in the future, and another thing I'm seeing as a trend, and I'm calling it out now, is the attendance of universities is dropping like crazy, because as the hiring demand from these companies increases, hiring companies are valuing the completions of boot camps much more than the completions of a college degree. And obviously, if you pay, $15,000 to $20,000 to get a certification, it's a lot less than having to pay $15,000 to $25,000 a year to get a college degree. Yeah. So, that's something that I think is really hot, and something to pay attention to.
Yeah, that would be a weird world, right? Where the colleges are basically now just, hey, if you need to do this, you got to get a doctorate in something, or you want to go be a lawyer or something like that. For the rest of us, we can all find our way. The work experience, I think, is valued so much more. I mean, 2 years ago, even they wouldn't look at an SDR without college experience. Yeah. Now it's like they don't have college experience. Who gives a crap? You know what I mean?
Now it's like, I almost want somebody who doesn't have college experience.
Exactly.
So the completion of a 3-month boot camp is being prioritized much higher for the employer than the completion of a 4-year degree. So, this is just my prediction. You've heard it here first. I think college in the future is going to be more considered for an experience, mm-hmm. and for like elite specific roles like nursing and like law. Mm-hmm. And, there may even become boot camps for that, but people are looking for convenience. And people are looking for like quick results.
Yep. Everything's got to move faster, at least until the robots take over, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Kendrick, I really appreciate your time. I know we ran a little bit over, but I want to make sure that everybody knows where they can connect with you. How can they get in contact with you or us in tech? Plug some of your resources, plug your contact info. How do we connect with you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I would say, follow us on LinkedIn. Us in Technology. We're revamping our website right now, usintechnology.com. But where we have the most traction and the most buzz is on Instagram. So follow us on Instagram. It's at Us in Tech. And you'll get to see a lot of our testimonials from our clients. You'll get to see a lot of testimonials from people in our community. And my bet would be that you see someone on that Instagram that relates similar to you, in whatever position and experiences you may have. So thanks a lot, Chet, for, having me on this call. Shout out to Jarlene for even just holding it down, kind of recommending me as a potential guest on this session. And, this is an exciting time for the world and the future of work. A lot of changes are going to be made. And I look forward to, helping anyone who's, trying to prioritize the hiring of DEI candidates.
Love it. Thank you for your time, Kendrick. And for the listeners that are also interested in connecting with the SalesRX community, you can find our podcasting community on LinkedIn. You can check out the resources in any of our social bios for things like career coaching opportunities, as well as our SDR to AE program and exclusive VIP invites to the Pavilion community as well. Until then, we will see you on the next one. Thanks for your time, Kendrick.
Thank you, brother.